Hi, everybody. So, we're so excited today to be here to talk about one of the most talked about and exciting films, the film that has seemed to have united all of film Twitter, is the newest film from Sony Animation. We're talking Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and I'm Rachel, and Conrado is here.
Hey, that's me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, before we kind of dive into this particular film, I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about our feelings on Spider-Man up until this point. The Raimi films, the Andrew Garfield movies, and then Spider-Man: Homecoming. Where are you at on sort of the franchise as a whole?
Um, well, first of all, I just want to say the reason why Rachel has brought me on this podcast is because I am from a different universe in which Spider-Man is actually Glenn Close. So instead of being an actress, she's a crime fighter. So she has also won already like 3,000 Oscars, so nobody cares about the wife.
Right. That's the like the 20th of the parallel universes.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
But funny enough, in my universe, we got the same Spider-Man movies that you got in your universe, so we can talk about them.
Oh, good. That's good.
Um, and that's great because I love Spider-Man as a character, and I always have since I watched the cartoon, the '90s cartoon as a kid. And um, there was also, I don't know if you know this other cartoon, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, in which he had Iceman and Starfire were his friends. It was
Oh.
like an older version.
Hmm.
I think it's from the 80s or so. I also watched that in reruns. But anyway, I love Spider-Man. I love the Sam Raimi movies, especially Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. And
Hmm.
I have to say, I will defend Spider-Man 3. At the time, I thought it was bad, just like everyone else. But I watched it again a couple of years ago, and I think there is a lot of going on there. It's a bit of messy, but it's got a lot of personality, which I like.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm the same as you. I love Spider-Man too. I mean, Spider-Man was really the first X-Men movie were really like the first comic book movies that I ever really liked because I wasn't a big fan of any of the Batman movies, and so uh, for for me it was it was sort of my gateway drug, I guess, to comic book movies,
Right.
and I did, I guess I did like the original Superman, but I don't know, I just really liked the whole dynamic of uh, Peter, and especially in the second one with him kind of losing his powers and what's he going to do. And I think that there's a lot of, I don't know, they do a good job of creating a layered character that's not just about the villains, which is my problem with Batman movies most of the time. They create a compelling hero that has to decide whether he wants to serve or whether and he has to, and he's going to sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
for for that decision, and it's going to cost him. And so it was really, really good. And
Hmm.
uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think something interesting about that, what you say also, is that I feel like sometimes we forget, but really, the first Spider-Man from 2002, I feel like it's really the first movie that sort of sets the template of the superhero sort of boom that we're in. Because I
Yeah.
think even X-Men, which came a couple years before it, they were still trying to do like, these black leather costumes. And it was, trying to be sort of like a 90s action science fiction movie. And I think it's really Spider-Man that brings sort of the costume and the colors and the sort of heroism that we're going to see ever since then, up to
Mhm.
this point. And I think it's also interesting that it's the first one that sets the template for the origin story that we've seen so many times, and that will also play a role in this movie that we're going to talk about in Spider-Verse.
That's true.
Because like you say, the Batman movies from the 90s, none of them had origin stories, really. Not for Batman. Some of them had a little bit for Robin, but those were like supporting characters.
Right.
And Spider-Man is really the first one that really goes into detail of how he becomes Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah. And as far as the Mark Webb, the one starring Andrew Garfield, I never really liked them very much because I just didn't really like Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. I found him smug and irritating for me. I know a lot of people like him, but he just wasn't my favorite. I did like Emma Stone and Gwen Stacy. I thought was better than Mary Jane. I think that was an improvement. I wasn't a big fan of any of the villains, even though I'm not a villain person in those two movies. I thought they were both pretty irritating. And so they weren't for me. I didn't really care for them.
Yeah, I'm also not the biggest fan of them, although I agree with you about Andrew Garfield being a little too quippy, too many. I don't know. He has a weird attitude, like you say. What did you call him? Sort of snarky or
Smug.
smug? Yeah, that's what it is. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. Um, that being said, I remember liking certain parts of the second one they did quite a bit, much more than most people. I think most people trashed that movie, but
Yeah.
I think sort of like the relationship between the two of them, I think they had a lot of chemistry, Garfield and Emma Stone. And, there's a lot of drama surrounding these two characters that has nothing to do with like superhero fights that I really appreciated and really worked on me in that second movie.
That's definitely the best part for sure, is the relationship between because I think they were dating at the time, and so there was definitely some chemistry. That was definitely the best part. I do agree there. So and then we got last year the Spider-Man Homecoming, the big MCU. I mean, technically, I guess Spider-Man was in Civil War, MCU, but his solo movie with Tom Holland as Spider-Man, I think I didn't. I thought that it was maybe a tiny bit overpraised, but I thought it was solid. I liked it. It just wasn't my favorite of the year or something that people were saying, but I thought it was solid. I thought they did a good job, particularly with him and his friend. I really liked sort of that high school dynamic. They're definitely trying to do sort of a John Hughes kind of a feeling to a superhero movie, which was interesting. I don't think we'd ever really seen that before.
Yeah, I think we're on similar pages. I think the best thing about that movie again is sort of the everything that has to do with the high school and the friends and the John Hughes part of it. And I think the superhero stuff is not my favorite. I was a little disappointed to see how much they kind of, I don't know. I don't like being a purist about this stuff, but I do feel like they turned Spider-Man a little bit into an Iron Man with his like suit and everything it could do and the computer that talks to him. I wasn't crazy about that.
Yeah, that was my favorite, and all of the action was very Iron Man-y in feel. But yeah, I mean Michael Keaton was pretty good as Vulture. He was pretty fun, and there was that pretty tense scene of them in the car. I think that worked really well. So overall, it was a solid film. I enjoyed it. But they had announced this movie, and in 2015 they'd announced it. So we'd heard about it for a long time, and at least if you're kind of in this animation news kind of web thing, we'd heard about it for a long time. And I was nervous because of Sony Animation was the ones who were doing it. They'd had such a rocky couple of years, Sony Animation. I mean, last year they had the Emoji Movie, which was not great. and they just seemed to keep picking projects that were just very misguided. They had their I actually liked their Smurfs movie last year, but the then they had the Star, which was which wasn't very good, and I don't know, there was just a bunch of years where they had made really pretty mediocre movies, but they I still liked them better than Illumination, who hadn't ever done, in my opinion, haven't ever done anything interesting or tried really at all, in my opinion. And but there were a couple things that kind of got me excited and got me some confidence in Sony Animation for this. Was first, they had Peter Ramsey as one of the co-directors, and he's pretty cool director. Peter Ramsey, he had previously done Rise of the Guardians, which I think is very underrated.
Yeah, I never saw it.
Oh, you should see it. It's beautifully animated, and my friend Stanford and I did talked about it for Obscure Animation. We have a whole podcast. I'll put a link in the description if it wants this is, but he already had experience doing a beautifully animated, basically superhero movie. So that was exciting. And it's also really cool that he's the first African American to direct an animated film, a mainstream animated film. So that's cool. And he's just a really cool director.
Right, and that was for Rise of the Guardians, right? That was his first sort of...
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Rise of the Guardians, and that was for DreamWorks. And it's not perfect, but I think it's a really solid little movie that deserved to do better than it did.
Right, it didn't do very well at the box office, right?
No, they didn't do a very good job. In the history of me and DreamWorks Animation, the ones that I like never make any money.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah, and so I'm bad luck when it comes to DreamWorks. But yeah, it's such a shame too, because I feel like there's all these books and there's so much potential. They could have. I mean, I would way rather have 5 Rise of the Guardians movies than 5 Shrek movies. Let's just say that. Anyway, so that gave me some confidence. The other thing that gave me some confidence in the movie is when I heard that Lord and Miller were attached to it, and just a bunch of the different people involved gave me some excitement. And then I saw the first trailer, and I was blown away.
I think that was really right what did it for most people, because I remember also thinking a movie about a bunch of Spider-Man that it sounded dumb to me, and it sounded like a terrible idea. What are these guys gonna do? This is gonna be bad. But then the trailer, which showcased this like really unique style that they're going for, is really what got me interested in the movie.
Yeah, it was so exciting. And I'm normally not a trailer person. Most of the time I'm like, ugh, trailers look terrible. But this just, whoa, it looks so exciting. And so I was very, very pumped going into this movie. There was so much hype. But for me, at least, it completely lived up to the hype. I thought it was completely brilliant on both a story and technical level. I can't wait to see it many more times. And I just loved it. I thought it was incredible. What was your overall thoughts about the film?
I thought it was great. I thought it was really good, and I hadn't really felt, I don't think, this way about a superhero movie in a while.
Yeah.
I think I like it a lot as a superhero story, and I like it a lot as a piece of animation. I think they really knocked it out of the park on both counts. And
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. All right. Well, so that's how wanted to divide it up and talk about both sort of aspects of it. And so the first thing I thought we talked about is why it works as a superhero movie. What in your mind makes a good superhero movie?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I think the thing that I respond to the most about superhero movies, as you might have seen from the things that I liked from previous
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man, is sort of like the human melodrama of it all, you know? I think the
Mm-hmm.
action sequences can be really great, and that always helps. Having a good villain also helps. But I think it's really this sort of thing of what I find so great about Spider-Man is that he has such a melodramatic origin story, and he has such a melodramatic life, right? I think in Spider-Man 2, you see this guy who just can't catch a break. He just everything happens to him. He can't hold on to his job. He doesn't have the girl that he wants, and and all that sort of thing. So when he finally does achieve something, he finally gets the girl, he defeats the villain. It's like a huge triumph, and that's sort of what I like about those movies and about Spider-Man as a character,
Mm-hmm.
that he doesn't always have it all together. He's like sort of has to fight um, the villains, but also fight himself, and in order to get to save the world. I guess I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. For me, what I like in a superhero movie is sort of the old school battle of good versus evil and good triumphing and to be to be inspired to come out of it feeling like uh I don't know, just the old school idea of good defeated evil, and the characters that I like and can relate to at least a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and that in sort of the struggle of life that you have here, the superhero has overcome the struggle, the struggles, and that good has defeated evil. That's why I don't like things like the Zack Snyder movies, because for me they're just very, I don't get that feeling of inspiration of
Mm.
the good has won, and they're just very like, oh, to me. And and I mean, that's why I like the old school like Superman movie. It's about truth, justice, and the American way, kind of thing. That's what I like, not this
Okay.
depressed Superman kind of thing. And maybe
Sure.
I like my superhero movies to be a little cheesy. For some people, I like them to be inspiring and woohoo, we won, good side won.
Right.
And I do admit that I like my superhero movies to be kind of have witty banter and to leave with just sort of a smile on my face. And I don't like sort of, I'm not a big, in general, I'm not a big anti-hero person. I'm not somebody that likes sort of, and it can be done good, but I don't know. I like my heroes pretty more on sort of the cheesy uh kind of side. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, and
I think I agree with you on that. I think I like them a little cheesy. I honestly really like the fact that in the middle of Batman v Superman, this really dark movie, they bond over the fact that their moms have the same name. I think that's amazing. I think that's the sort of thing that I want, because I feel like
yeah,
comic books come from that sort of,
yeah,
page turner, cliffhanger, melodramatic storytelling of the early 20th century, where
yeah,
it's just like keep the plot going. Like anything can happen in
yeah,
this when you read a comic book,
yeah,
uh, and
yeah,
it doesn't have to be so serious. That's what I like about that
yeah.
sort of.
Yeah, it should be some more escapism about it. And I mean, I think that's in general why I like the Marvel movies is they're very like positive and witty and enjoyable, and escapism, and I just think they're fun, and for the most part. And I do like a good spectacle that's if it's done right. I do like a good sort of spectacle entertainment, and you go and get kind of entertained. So yeah, those are some of the things that I like. And so this movie, as far as those aspects, I think it's so good because Miles is such a relatable character. I think anybody can relate to those frustrations about trying to get along with your family, trying to deal with things at school. He has these artistic ambitions, but he doesn't know kind of what to do with them. And
Mm-hmm.
he just, I don't know, he's not, because I also don't really like super angsty teenager movies, but in this case he's not super angsty. He's just kind of quiet and and a little
Yeah,
frustrated, and
I
I just a
think
very relatable character.
definitely. I think he's as angsty as most teenagers are, you know? It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
like an
yeah,
unrealistic level of angstiness, which I think helps a lot. And I think I agree with you. I think they do a really great job with the character. And I think the voice actor, Shamik Moore, he also does a really good job of
yeah,
sort of balancing, you know, the making him, you know, paying attention to all the sort of drama and problems that he's dealing with while making him like funny and lighthearted and, you know, sort of attractive in that way.
yeah, yeah, I think so. And he's feels like a teenager. I mean, it's not, I mean, they did a good job with this in Homecoming, but it's not one of those ones where you feel like he's, 35 in
Yeah.
high school, the kind of thing. He feels like a teenager, and he feels uh, like there's certain times when he feels more like a child, and other times where he feels more like a grown up. They do a good job sort of bridging that in between. Like he needs people, but then he also is really independent. I think he's strong, but weak in those kind of ways that the teenagers are, because they still need their family, but they're figuring things out on their own as well. So it's an interesting dynamic, and I don't know, you just really related to him. You wanted him to succeed almost immediately.
Yep, definitely.
I thought they did a pretty good job of creating his the atmosphere at the school, and you feel it kind of reminded me of the the Hate You Give. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Oh, it's pretty good movie. And because in that movie she's going to sort of this uh this ritzy white kind of school
Mm,
to get it kind of away from the area that she's there where they live, and sort of this similar dynamic in there. But I don't know, I just think they did a pretty good job of setting up that dynamic, particularly I think between him wanting to do the graffiti art and versus like his
hmm.
his environment at school.
Yeah. The I think that you know what? Okay, so we were talking about the trailer, right? And
Oh
how
yeah.
I didn't really think this was a good idea. And then what the trailer did was that it made it look beautiful and interesting enough in terms of animation that it was like, okay, even if it's just going to be this messy, whatever superhero story, at least the animation is going to be great. So I'm going to enjoy that. And one of the things that really surprised me in a positive way was that I thought the story and the way they handled the superhero stuff was so good. And like you say, Miles, the character, has to do a lot with it. I think there's also this thing of they're trying to do a lot of interesting things with this Spider-Man sort of iconography and how we, the audience, relate to Spider-Man, right?
Mm,
um, I get the feeling that this, because the whole deal of the story, I think, is this idea that Spider-Man can be anyone, and it's something that a lot of people have pointed out throughout the years, is that a lot of kids identify with Spider-Man because he wears this mask, and you can imagine that it can be you behind the mask or whatever. And this movie kind of makes that literal by having all these different Spider-Man and centering on this kid who does start out in a world where there is already a Spider-Man, and he ends up becoming sort of a new Spider-Man. And I think
that's
that
true.
is a very affecting and interesting thing to do, especially at this point in time when we've had enough superhero movies that we all know how, you know, kids and teenagers feel about superheroes. So it's bringing it into a new level, I think.
Yeah. Did you feel like the spider that bites him? Did you feel like that was just random, or that was somehow selected him, that there was something somehow, either somebody, sort of put the spider into his path, or there was, I don't know, there was something sort of, did you feel like it was random, or it was something sort of
Uh,
chosen about him?
yeah. Well, um, I wouldn't be surprised if we get a sequel that they will explain that it was not something random, it was not a coincidence, it was on purpose or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the moment, it felt to me like it was a coincidence, and I just went with it. I was just okay. He got bit by a spider,
Yeah.
um, because that's kind of the movie kind of makes fun of it. It's just going through the motions. Everyone just says, yeah, in my universe, I got bit by a spider, and I got bit by a spider. You know what I mean? So I think it fit with the tone of the movie. I did think of it as just something that happened. It didn't seem like it had a, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I should give a little warning, as we're going to start to get a little bit spoilery here. But so what did you think of his relationship with his uncle Aaron?
With his ankle, and played by Oscar winner Mahershala Ali, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He does a really good job, I think. Yeah, okay. So the relationship with the uncle, um, I thought it was really well done, and what I love about it is how what happens to that relationship, because again reminds me of the sort of like high stakes melodrama, and it's what makes his
Mm-hmm.
origin story melodramatic in the same way that everyone else's Spider-Man origin story is melodramatic. And I really appreciated that, um that
Yeah.
they were going into that sort of coincidence and emotion, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because when it's revealed that Aaron is the Prowler, is the villain, it's it shouldn't work because we've gotten that reveal thing so many times. But I was kind of devastated for Miles at that moment. I was like, oh no.
Hmm.
I felt bad.
Yeah, I mean, because right, because they set it up so well by making the uncle sort of like the one person that sort of understands him and that takes
Yeah.
him out to do his graffiti or whatever. So yeah, it's a very old-fashioned, punch to the gut sort of payoff. But I thought it was good storytelling for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there is this Kingpin, who uh, is the main villain.
Hmm.
And I'm not a villain person, so it does, a lot of people are like, oh, he was the weakness of the movie, he was boring, whatever. He was fine for me. I don't have any problem with him. He
Yeah.
does what's required to do for the story to move the hero along,
Hmm.
and not be distracting.
And also the design of the character is so great, I
Yeah.
think. I love the fact that it's so huge compared to everyone else, and he's got like this weird sort of hunched back, and he doesn't look like a human, and I love that they were taking advantage of what animation can do in character design.
Yeah, yeah. And so they find out that that Kingpin has uh this device that will get you into different dimensions. I forget exactly what they call it. but yeah, and so we've they're a particle accelerator to access parallel universes, is what they call it, I guess. And the Peter Parker from their uh era ends up getting killed by
Right.
Kingpin, and then he kind of senses something in Miles, and
Hmm.
so they kind of calls him to to disable the accelerator. They fight, and so there's and so then we get kind of this next part of the movie with these different Spider-Men who come through this particle accelerator, come in, and
Yeah.
there's the crime noir. These are all real Spider-Man from the comics. They exist as separate comics. There's uh, there's Peter Parker, who's kind of this voiced by Jake Johnson.
Yeah, Peter B. Parker.
Henry B. Parker, who's kind of the drunk version of Peter
Yeah,
Parker.
it's
Because the
kind of
one
like,
that,
yeah,
yeah,
the washed up Peter Parker.
yeah,
Yeah.
because the one that died was your all-American kind of
Mm-hmm.
version. And then you have that he was voiced by Chris Pine,
Yeah.
and then you have the anime Spider-Man, who has sort of a big year six kind of
Mm-hmm.
uh, like
Yeah, Penny
assistant.
Parker.
Yeah, yep. And then you have Crime Noir
Yeah.
Parker, voiced by Nicolas Cage, brilliant.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
And
Yeah.
now Nicolas Cage can say he voiced both Spider-Man and Superman in 1 year, so that's pretty fun. He was in Teen Titans Go to the Movies, which is
Oh, really? That's great.
actually quite fun. I recommend it. I laughed a lot in it. Um, and then there is Peter Porker.
Yeah.
That was pretty brilliant. John Mulaney did a
Yeah.
great job with that. And yeah, and I don't know, what did you think of these different Spider-Men? And then there's Spider-Gwen.
Spider-Gwen, yes, of course. Um, so about I think that's great. I think they had a lot of fun with this, and something that I really appreciated beyond the comedy, which a lot of these characters are really funny,
Yeah.
was that these sort of weird Spider-Man from different dimensions came into our dimension with a different style of animation, right?
Yes.
The anime Spider-Man looks like an anime character and behaves different from Miles because she's not a Western CG character, and the same with the Spider-Ham or Peter Porker, who behaves like a cartoon character, almost like a Looney Tune.
Yeah.
And they look different and they are animated differently, and I think it's great. I think it works so well in a way that it could never work in live action.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I thought it was brilliant. I mean, as soon as they had that, I think it was like the second or third trailer that they showed all the different spider people, and I was just like, oh, wow, the one really looks anime the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And and then you have this crime noir that looks crime noir, like it looks like somebody
Yeah.
from the
Who's in black and white the whole time, right? Yeah.
brilliant, amazing. I was blown away, and I liked all of the voice acting that they got, and I liked that they each kind of had they there was none that were grating or irritating in my opinion. They all worked together as a group, but also were fun individually. I just really enjoyed all of them. They thought they were great, and so, and it's pretty simple. Like once, as far as the story, it's kind of classic comic book, but they were so creative, and they did a good job, I think, creating tension because it none of them were like super strong, if that makes sense. None of them were even though you think if you have 5 different Spider-Men, they like Kingpin's not going to have a chance, but that's not the case. Like things get pretty tense.
Yeah. Well, and King also has like a bunch of henchmen that are gonna help him out. But yes, of course, definitely. And the other thing that was great was the sort of teamwork that they, in the action sequences, which is something that I love every time it's in a superhero movie.
Yeah.
It's The Incredibles, of course, is like the biggest example of doing that wonderfully, when it's like one power plays off of another and they together defeat the enemy.
Yeah, there's that whole meme about the hold my beer kind of meme that they have. It was pretty funny. Somebody said Brad Bird, I'm going to revolutionize action in superhero movies. That was like Sony Animation, hold my beer. Yes. Because it's kind of, I mean, it is pretty, well, I mean, both of them have really incredible action, but the action in this was really a great job in creating a spectacle, which is what you want in these movies. It doesn't look the same as other action movies. It's not all orange all the time, which is one of my big pet peeves of action
Sure.
movies.
Yeah. I have to say the action was good and it looked great. I think the action in Incredibles 2 is better though. I
Oh,
think
interesting.
Brad
Okay.
Bird has like a specific eye specifically for like sort of like using the space and making you know where everyone is during the
Yeah.
action sequences and how you're moving forward in the action. I think he has something that very few other people have. Like maybe him and Spielberg are the only two that I can point out that are like, you know,
Uh-huh.
top masters of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But you know, nothing to be ashamed of. There's like
Right.
these people who
Right.
are geniuses, and then there's people who are really great at their job.
Right. Yeah. Very true. So, let's talk a little bit about the animation. And I there were a lot of things that they really did that was special in this movie. The first full cuts of the animatics and storyboards was over 2 hours long.
Hmm.
And then they had to then go and they have this balance of trying to make sure it appealed to children while still doing something that would also appeal to the live action superhero crowd. So balancing both of those things, and not that animation can't be for adults, but that they were in what I read, that was sort of their how do we appeal to the younger animation crowd and also appeal to older live action crowd.
Interesting.
Uh,
And do you know what they decided the strategy was going to be there? Is it the comedy sort of for the kids or?
yeah, and I think the aesthetic was more what they hoped would appeal. They
Hmm.
wanted it to feel like you walked inside a comic book was
Hmm.
their goal,
Yes.
and I think that they very much achieved that that balance. And it is tough, to and just the balance of tone, I think, that
Hmm.
they were able to do with having those more adult moments, but then also making it palatable to kids. And whether it's yeah, like the Peter Porker or just making Miles so relatable, I
Hmm.
think they did a good job with that balance.
Yeah, and the whole stepping into a comic book sort of thing, I think they nailed that in, you know, particularly spectacular fashion. I think they did an amazing job in because I feel like there's been movies in the past that have tried to bring the comic book aesthetic to you know, film, and you know things like Hulk by Ang Lee. You know how they had
Oh
like
yeah.
sort of the panels and whatever, and then Dick Tracy back in the '90s, which had this
Hmm.
like very stylized colors and whatever in the comic book world. I think this is the first time that it's like works 100% in which it feels like reading a comic book, but it's also moves like a movie is supposed to move,
Yeah.
and you know. Um, and I think they did an amazing job with that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in many ways, I think of Who Framed Roger Rabbit that does such a good job of telling a pretty grown-up story, but also, obviously you have Daffy and Mickey and all these characters that are beloved to children. There's nothing in there that's like, I don't know, embarrassing to to any that's making fun of those characters, or
Hmm.
that's I think that's another sort of example of finding that balance, that works really well.
That's a great example, both in the balance of like, you know, children and adult entertainment, and also in the sort of bringing two different aesthetics
Hmm.
together, right? In
Yeah.
that case, it was sort of film noir and cartoons, and you know how they do here with you know superhero movies and comic book animation,
Yeah.
which yeah.
Yeah. And they had ended up with 142 animators working on this film, and their goal was to create CG animation that was combined with line work and painting and dots and all sorts of comic book techniques to make it look like it was
Mhm.
created by hand, which was described as a living painting. And
Mm.
I really think they succeeded in this. I mean, it's really. I mean, you just look on Twitter, all the responses from different animators. They're all just blown away. Like Jorge Gutierrez, I was wondering his on his Twitter, he was just like, this is a game changer. And I think it's true what they were able to do with, particularly with the scenes of him being Spider-Man, the way he flies through the air. And I mean, when he's sort of trying to decide whether he's going to actually jump off the building.
It's a great scene.
Oh, so good. I mean, I felt a little like ooh. It was just so immersive. It was incredible.
Yeah. I also think that the sort of like the game-changing thing about this, or rather another game-changing thing about this whole movie, is how we finally get a CG animated movie that is not trying to look like Pixar, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's been a long time, and obviously because Pixar sort of set the paradigm for this sort of movie, everyone has tried to be as close to them as possible, and now we're finally getting to the point, which is something that I have been hoping for a while, of using computer animation to look different ways, and to use it in all this sort of crazy new ways that, you know, are so exciting, because we've been having, you know, the same aesthetic over and over. I think one of the things that's so frustrating about Illumination Studios, which you talked about, is that they are just happy with their like rubbery minions and doing the same thing over and over again. And this is, I hope that this is like a game changer, and that we see things like this, because we've seen some of it in other movies. Like, you know, there was that section in Moana with the black light lighting, which I thought was really interesting. And there was obviously Paperman, the short, which also had a similar aesthetic to this a little bit, between hand-drawn and CG.
Yeah, that had that meshing of the two. And yeah, I'm so excited. I hope that we continue to see because you did feel like for a while that, you know, all of the animated films just looked the same, and there wasn't anything that sort of was exciting. I mean, I don't know, there was a lot of photorealism, which I don't know, but I felt like that was sort of, with things like The Good Dinosaur, that was sort of pushed as far as it's gonna go. How much more photorealistic can you get? And so that was sort of done. We need something new.
Definitely. And the other thing is that we use computer animation in all of our movies now, all of the time. You know, every superhero live action movie is full of photorealistic animation. So it's not really, it's become an everyday thing. It's not special anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's true. And so they what they did was really interesting. So they took rendered frames from the CGI animators, and then they worked on top of that rendered frame in 2D. So the goal was to make every frame of the film look like a comic panel. And so that was really good. And it kind of reminded me of, when I was reading about it, it kind of reminded me of old school Disney with things like Sleeping Beauty, where they took the layers of the backgrounds that were multiple layers of backgrounds, and then placed the animation on top to make it have a lyric, almost illustrated quality to it, like you're reading a book. And in that, you know, that's the highest compliment I can pay, is if something reminds me of Sleeping Beauty. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful films.
Yeah, that's a great call. Yeah, that's totally, and that's sort of like, yes, I couldn't be happier about this sort of like the animation part of this. It just feels like such a, you know, unexpected thing that we hadn't gotten in such a long time. Something that is pushing the aesthetics of animation in such a, you know, way contrary to like most movies that are out.
Yeah, I mean, and then not only do you have that 2D versus CG quality, but like we already talked about, you have the individual animation for each of the characters, which is amazing. So the co-director Patrick O'Keefe, he said that committing fully to each spider's unique art style was like making 5 different movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that even added onto it even more.
Yeah, it was worth it, at least, artistically. And I think the movie's gonna do well at the box office, or at least I hope it does.
I hope so too. I hope so too. And yeah, and then they didn't just stop at, because a lot of movies, uh, they have something groundbreaking, they have something cool visually, but then something exciting kind of they're so occupied with the what they're trying to do aesthetically that they kind of forget to make the writing as good as the rest of their stuff. I mean, something like Avatar, was like I'm kind of a defender of Avatar. I don't think it's as bad as some people say. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
perfectly serviceable.
Yeah, I'm with you on
um,
that.
but it's just too long. That's the problem with Avatar. It should not be almost 3 hours long.
Right.
But anyway, but I think that is an example of a movie that was probably very, very concerned with doing something groundbreaking aesthetically and less concerned with having a good script. But here, I think that they did a great job with both, and they, having Lord and Miller involved. I mean, it ended up the credits went to the Lord and Miller did the original mock-up, I guess they called it, and then Rodney Rothman and Phil Lord were the end credits. But
Right.
They just did such a good job of the script and making the characters relatable and fun and interesting, and also making you laugh. And they just did, the story is great. It's good, and I don't know. I just think that's very impressive.
Very impressive. And yeah, I mean, they did a great job. I don't know what else to say about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and then just lastly, the last point I had was just, I think that Daniel Pemberton did a great job with the music.
Daniel Pemberton, and also the sort of like the songs that they made up for the
Mhm.
music. I've been listening to the soundtrack since, in the couple of days since I've seen the movie. I think they do a great job with, you know, sort of like, and using the songs, not just, you know, like they have these great sequences of him like discovering his powers, and you have this like these great hip hop songs playing in the background. I
Yeah.
think they use them really well. There's also that song that when we first see him, he's sort of like trying to, listening to this song and sort of like trying to sing along with it, but he doesn't know the lyrics, which I think is a really cute moment that tells us a lot
Yeah,
about the character.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, so they did a good job with that. So, yeah, it is a groundbreaking film. It's very exciting especially for those of us that love animation. In my opinion, it's been a very stellar year of animation. I don't know. I mean, the only animated film that for me recently was better was I loved Your Name. I just connected with it so
Mm.
emotionally, and I loved it. That one to me is but this is just very, very special, and it's very exciting, and I'm
Mhm.
just I'm
Yeah.
just so happy that it exists.
Um, you've probably seen way more animated movies than me this year. I will say, from what I've seen, this is easily my favorite. I feel like I've had issues with all of the animated movies that I've seen this year.
Uh-huh.
This is the only one that I could be like, if I wanted to find something to nitpick about, I could, but like, it's nitpicking, it's a
Right.
great movie. They did a great job. That's all I can say about it.
I agree. Very, very good. So, well, it's been really fun to talk about this movie, and I really appreciate you coming on and just because it's just the kind of movie that you just want to praise, and hopefully we can get maybe a few people to go see it, and
Yes.
and yeah, I hope the people. I mean, I'm going to see it multiple times because you definitely want to try to have that big screen experience, I think, with this one if you can.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
yeah.
And if you have kids, I would say kids between the ages of like 8 and 10, 11. I think if I saw
Mhm.
this movie when I was that age, I would go crazy about it. I would love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that it will appeal to both boys and girls. I
Yes, definitely.
mhm. So you can take the whole family. I think they'll really enjoy it and get something out of it. And there's nothing really like offensive or something that you have to sort of explain to your kids or whatever.
Hmm.
And so it's just great. And I'm really excited about it. And so yay, everybody go see it and let us know in the comments section what you thought about it. What were your favorite parts of about it being both a superhero movie and being an animated film, why it worked for you. And or maybe you're one of the people who didn't like it, put in the comments section. Let us know. Not many
Yes.
out there who did,
If
but
you're one of them, I wish you luck in your travels.
yeah, that's right. So anyway, let us know. That would be awesome. And so Conrado, how can people find you?
Okay, so the best way to find me is probably on Twitter, and that would be at Coco Hits New York. Or you can go and visit my blog, which is cocohitsny.wordpress.com.
Very, very good. Yeah, I'll have that all in the description section. Check it out. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media and in on iTunes and on YouTube. If you're listening on iTunes, please give us a rating and review. We really appreciate that. And if you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. That is always very helpful. So thanks so much again, Corrado. This was really fun.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. And we plan on having more podcasts coming up towards the beginning of the year. We'll talk about some of our favorites. We did our superlatives last year, and we're definitely going to try to do that again this year, and some of our other fun stuff. So it
Yeah.
should be good. So
Hmm.
well, so thanks so much, everybody, and we'll talk again soon.
Bye.
Bye.